like it. You want a podcast like it? Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. Just podcast like it. Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. You want a podcast like it's 1999.
Hello and welcome to Podcast Like It's 1999, the podcast where we talk about the films of 1999 from the bridge of the NSEA Protector here in 2021. I am one of your hosts, Kenny Neibart.
And I'm Phyllis Gove.
And with us today, in the future, I guess, because we're recording this in 2020, but it is going to be our first episode of 2021, is Felicia Day, writer, director, actor, and streamer, and so many other things. Google her, motherfuckers. It's nice to see you, Felicia.
I was going to ask if we could swear, but clearly not. Hey, I've never directed. That's. I'm saving that for a
What did I get?
direction.
Did you tell me producer?
Producer.
Yeah, producer.
Well, you know.
I mean, I guess I've directed pretty much like hundreds of videos where I just jump cut my own face. I guess that's directing, right?
That's what I was talking about. Exactly.
All right.
It's so good to have you on. Thank you so much for doing this and coming on to talk with us about Galaxy Quest. It is one of kind of the tentpole movies for us. One of the movies that makes this year so special, and it's not really like anything else that came out this year. So we're so happy to have you.
Have there been a lot of Ashley Judd movies you've covered? Didn't she work a lot in '99?
Well, she did Double Jeopardy.
Yeah.
But
We
was
did
there
Double
something
Jeopardy,
else,
yeah.
Phil?
She feels like
think
she was
there's
very
Double Jeopardy,
prolific during
unfortunately.
that time. Yeah.
I think there's something else forthcoming. I think there's something like Eye of the Beholder.
Oh
or
yeah,
something along
Eye of the
those
Beholder,
lines.
the Ewan McGregor. Yeah,
Was he
she
naked
was very
in that
big
one?
in the early 2000s.
Because I remember he was
Probably.
very naked in the early 2000s as well.
I don't remember that, not for any real reason, but I remember Train Spotting. You got a nice little glimpse.
Feature. Yeah,
Feature
the filming
player.
debut of Mr. Wiggles. Mr. Wiggles.
Mr. Wiggles. So yes, we're 1 for 2 in Ashley Judd, and this is our second Tim Allen movie because we've already done Toy Story 2.
It is.
Wow. Toy Story 2. This was a good year for movies.
Oh my
Great for
goodness.
movies.
Yeah, it really is.
Unbelievable year. And we're so thankful to have you on for this one, which is obviously it's a big fan favorite. It's a big movie in '99. You know, we've been doing this for almost over 3 years now, Kenny. We've been doing this, and this is one that we've held on to for a while because we wanted to, make sure that we could get the best guest we could. And you're really just we couldn't have asked for a better guest for this movie. But just to rewind a little bit, Felicia, do you remember where you were in 1999 and if you saw this film around then?
I was in college. I graduated in 2000. So that I'm aging myself, but I did graduate. But I went to school when I was 16. So I was young. So I was probably, I don't even know how I was, like 19? Anyway, so I don't know how to add. I only got a math degree, guys. Oh my God. So I was in college and I took like 24 hours a semester because my mom made me live at home with her and drive me to school. So like I didn't have a social life. So I basically played video games and did 24 hours of credits a semester. And I ended up getting like, a couple of degrees and a bunch of half degrees. So I don't say that like movie consumption was not high on my list. I remember watching Friends, and that's about it.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in all of the South, but I went to UT Austin. So
Nice.
Austin, Texas.
As
So I was
did
really-
past and future guest Allison Akel also went to, I believe, UT Austin.
There's a lot of alumni. There's a lot of alumni in Austin, and there was a big film scene there because I got into the film business by volunteering at the Austin Film Festival and South by Southwest, and that's where I met a bunch of people from LA. And I was like, I know 3 screenwriters. I'm going to have a huge career as an actor.
That's how it works.
That's how. So you didn't see this film around its release, but you have subsequently seen this film, I'm assuming.
Of course, yes. But I did rewatch it for this to refresh myself.
Sure.
And I got immersed, and I was like, this is a really excellent movie. Like,
It
just
is.
down the line, it is well crafted in every single way.
Mm-hmm.
It's also just, there are a lot of movies made about fans,
Mhm.
but this movie, I feel like the beating heart of this movie is a love of fandom and wanting desperately to give fans the illusion or the reality that the thing they love is real, that it's not just, some sort of a fantasy, which is maybe the thing that I love most about it.
I mean, 100%. Like, it's surprising because, like, if you look at like the secondary characters and like the extras, I feel like they did a better job at diversity in this show, in this movie, like 20 years ago, than people do nowadays. So yeah, I do agree with that. And then also it's like an inside look at acting and actors in a way. So it's all this inside looks, but they were able to make inside accessible, which is really hard. And that's why, and great, and the great special effects, and it's just funny as hell. It's like a really good movie.
It's a very, very good movie. It's also threading a lot of needles. You were sort of talking about or alluding to like the metatextuality of it, the idea of these roles within roles, shows within shows, like that type of stuff can get very intellectual and can sort of, I don't want to say distract, but you can lose an audience in that. But this movie does it so seamlessly in making sure that people are in on the joke. If you know of Star Trek, this is going to work for you, but also finding layers for people that are diehard fans of it as well.
Yeah, it's almost like you want this template to be every video game movie that ever wasn't. Because I can't name one that's good, right? Let's just be honest. There's not one that's good.
We've done this. No, we've done this. Isn't there one that's good? Phil?
We tried this.
I think.
Oh boy.
I think there might be one that's good.
Oh, what was the one?
None are good. None are good. Though I thought Sonic was fine.
Yeah, Sonic was trash enough to be fine. But I hate Sonic anyway, so I didn't really.
Yeah,
I mean, I had a personal prejudice.
Sonic.
I hate Sonic. Is that kid who has gel
What has he
in their
done
hair
to you?
that punches you and smells a little bit like crust?
Yeah, I know exactly who he is. He sucks.
That's so specific.
And he only has one. He only has one skill. He's really fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's tricked the gym teachers into thinking he's a great athlete, but he's really just fast.
No, the one-trick pony.
I don't like Sonic very much either, but that's because I was a Nintendo kid, right? Like I always thought he was a bit of an interloper.
I was a Sega kid. But I want to ask Felicia, since we're on the subject, why do you think video game adaptations have not worked up until this point?
Well, I think that I think inherently studio people don't understand anything about video games. Like nothing. Okay. The executives have literally been like, "Oh, I played some Candy Crush and my kid plays, and I don't have a relationship with them because I'm a Hollywood person whose nanny raises their child." So that's that side. And then the other side is that video games don't need Hollywood, so they have a lot of creative control over their product because they frankly will make billions more dollars on their IP. And so they're super protective of their IP, but being a gamer means you need to be really inside your hardcore fans' heads. And so they probably wrest control of it too much in the opposite direction. And so you end up with this sort of like dumbed down mishmash of inside outside that nobody really cares about.
I think I think you're 100% right in everything you said. I also think they have been given to they've been ghettoized to some extent, right? Mm-hmm. Where the Marvel movies are made by the top people, and they're also made by people who really understand the IP. But when you look at the people who make these movies, and I'm not necessarily talking about the directors and the writers, but I'm talking about the studios and the execs. They're given to the people who don't have budgets, the people who are just looking to pump them out. And I think the best point you made is that the people who make them simply don't understand what the IP they're working with.
Yeah.
On top of that, video games already contain within them so much richness that really good ones, that cannot be captured with a single narrative. Generally,
yeah, I agree with you. And also, but if you look at Warcraft, like that's a director who loves Warcraft. You have a studio that kind of should have worked, and then it was probably the worst thing. So bad. Embarrassingly bad. And so it seemed like there were some creative decisions that were made that just were like, this is tanked and it's never going to get anywhere because of some creative decisions that look like they were made in the beginning. So that's a sad situation where you're like, this should work. The teams all should work. So maybe I think actually doing video games, because people will be hundreds of hours in there. And then you want people to understand a hundreds of hours world with 1.5 hours or 2 hours or however long people watch movies. I don't watch movies lately, but because I'm just playing too many video games. But at the end of the day, maybe I think TV shows, they're going to be doing a Fallout TV show. They're doing Assassin's Creed TV show. Like that's actually might work because you have the length of time that people will equivalently be in the world. I'm hoping.
They're doing a Halo show as well, or trying to do a Halo.
They've been talking about that for 15 years. But that's the other thing. That's the other point. You can't serve both masters, even the way you can serve both masters with a comic book. Marvel spent 20 movies building us up to the Infinity Stone story that was already written, that was already in comic book form. But you can't do what you're talking about by like distilling hundreds of hours of playable narrative into an 1.5-hour movie. And you also can't take one narrative from that 100 hours, put it into movie form, and please the hardcore fans of the game. That's what I felt like happened with Detective Pikachu. I felt like Detective Pikachu didn't really please anybody. I think it was inaccessible to people who had who had no knowledge of the game, and people who loved the game and loved this world thought it was for babies.
Yeah.
So
agree. No, I did the same thing. Assassin's Creed.
I have a question for you, Felicia, which I think
terrible. Yep. Let's trash other movies. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. Go.
My question to you is, and it folds into this movie as well. And I don't want to get into the toxicity of fandom because, it's gone to a dark place over the past few years. But I do want to sort of get your feelings on the differences between sort of, a Star Trek fandom or something of that ilk to video game fandom, which does feel different. Now, I don't know a ton about either of them, but I'm sort of curious as to whether or not you felt like this film sort of taps into that in the right way. I mean, it certainly does it in the most comedic and probably the most heartwarming way. But did you feel as though it was a accurate representation of fandom in that way? Did you feel as though, and sort of how that compares to video games?
I think fandom is one of those things you can't really paint with one brush anymore.
Sure.
I think maybe 10 years ago, you could have this sort of cliched nerd geek kind of culture thing. And I was certainly on the forefront of that. Now, I think there's just not one kind of fan. You have a lot of different aspects of all different fandoms. I mean, yes, people are hardcore Marvel fans, they're hardcore Naruto fans, they're hardcore video games. And because there's so much content out there, people don't necessarily have to get out of their silo. Like they are immersed in their fandoms, right? And so I think you have different angles on each. I think, the one thing that you would share a little in video games, I think tend to be more isolated amongst themselves, perhaps, because Star Wars is more of a casual thing that you could share with casual people. I mean, if a League person tries to get me into League of Legends, I'm just glazing over and I spend 20 hours a week playing video games, So it really is more of a specialty in a sense, gaming. And I do think that their own communities tend to be the more closed communities tend to be more white male isolated, and therefore you have that kind of toxicity that's particularly bad and kind of defines the internet now, unfortunately, in a lot of ways. I think things have gotten better the last couple of years, but certainly 4 or 5 years ago, the rise of and it obviously, I think it rubbed off on politics too, but it kind of reached its peak assholeness about 4 or 5 years ago.
Do you think that there's also, and Kenny and I talked a little bit about this when we talked about video games previously, but there's an interactive quality to it that makes it specialized to that one person, right? Like they're going on that journey themselves. And because of that specificity, because of that sort of individualism of it, they take an ownership of that journey, right? Like it feels like it's their own, as opposed to, watching a Star Wars movie or watching a Star Trek television show where that story is told to you rather than you actually physically being a part of it. Does that have something to do with it as well?
Yeah, I think everybody, unless you are playing Mario or you're playing a character, Sonic, you are Sonic, then you're projecting yourself and your kind of customization of yourself into that world, right? And like, if I were to watch an Assassin's Creed, like the lead guy is not me because I always play a woman, right? And so that's not my Assassin's Creed. So I think, but I do think, like, I think when you offer an accurate ensemble, with a bunch of different perspectives, like I think Witcher had some issues, but I do think that offering the different perspectives that it did kind of covered a gamut of types of players in a way. So I think a good ensemble, like if you did another D&D show, which I'm sure would not be good, unfortunately, but there would be a potential to create something like that, where you represent a lot of different kinds of aspects of people. I did that with the guild where you have 6 main characters, and I took a lot of archetypes that I've been encountered in my life. And I think a lot of people either saw themselves or another person in them. And that was a fandom show, right? We're talking about gaming fandom. But at the end of the day, each person is able to say, like, the same thing with Friends. I know a Joey. I know, those are good characters, right? You want, that's, I think, the heart of any show that a fan is going to be a fan of. Like, you have that kind of character ensemble of characters you can relate to and characters you can be friends with.
So, you go ahead. Sorry, Kendall.
Felicia, did you not to unless you want to keep going down this road, Phil? I just want to
go.
kind of pivot to this movie. Are you a Star Trek fan at all? Do you have any history with Star Trek?
I do. I think yes, I am a Star Trek fan. I was totally obsessed with Next Generation when I was a kid.
Sure.
I was in love with Picard. We were going to have British babies. Yeah, exactly. I also liked his second in command, which made it awkward when I was directed by Jonathan Frakes when I did an episode of Librarians.
I worked with Jonathan Frakes too. He's a lovely man.
He is very charming. He oozes charm.
Yeah.
He's an oozer in a good way. So yes, I'm a big Star Trek. I was not an original Star Trek fan.
It does feel like this movie, and J.J. Abrams has been pretty open about his love of this film. You can see this film having an impact on his Star Trek films for sure. Just in terms of the kind of the winkiness and certainly the humor that exists within his version of Star Trek. I certainly felt that. I also would say aesthetically as well. It felt like it had a lot of similarities. I don't know if you guys did as well.
I didn't really like his films, so.
Okay.
I didn't love them. They were fine.
Okay. I like the first one.
I like the first one.
It was okay.
But I do think that, I should lay it all out. Star Trek, it's not that I don't like Star Trek. It's just that it didn't pierce my bubble when I was a child.
Right.
So speaking as someone who did not necessarily have the specificity of reference when I watched this movie, the things that I got were the things you were talking about earlier, like Felicia, like I got the life of the actor, the way actors are viewed. I love the idea that the commander within the, world becomes the commander within. That happens all the fucking time. Where the guy, it's the most surreal thing. Where the guy who plays the police captain becomes the leader of the group. Where the guy who plays the principal becomes the leader of the group. That makes no sense. But that's people just. These are. It's like it's as silly as saying David Schwimmer and Courtney Cox couldn't date because they're brother and sister. Well they could, I think, because and I'm pretty sure Dexter married his sister in real life, but that was so weird, right?
Yeah, and Peter Croce is dating Lauren Graham. They were brother and sister on Parenthood.
Nightmare.
Gross.
But it is that. So I loved stuff like that in terms of the metatextuality. I don't honestly. For me, it just works as a sci-fi film.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like that's, and I watched it last night. So I hadn't seen this movie in at least 15 years, so I didn't remember a lot of it. I watched it last night with my son, and when Tony Shalhoub comes in at the end and shoots them up, he looks at me and he's riveted by this movie. I was very nervous. He's riveted. He looks at me and goes, "That's how this movie ends?" And he grabbed my hand. He's 8. He grabbed my hand, and then it killed everybody. And I'm like, you have to remember the Omega-13. They can go back 13 seconds. You have to. It's not going to end like this. So to me, there are very strong science fiction narrative elements going on in this movie that actually are effective. And the way they find their midpoint turn with them, with him having to acknowledge that he wasn't really a captain. It's a really rock solid, flawlessly structured movie. Aside from like the winky stuff, which works and it's very funny, but that's that's not front and center, and that's something I just love about this movie.
No, I fully agree. I mean, I think that this movie has a lot of heart and emotion in it, and you know, the first scene, the scene at the beginning when they're at the convention and Tim Allen overhears those kids shit talking the show and him and how big of like, which apparently, so legend says William Shatner had a similar situation where he overheard some people talking poorly of him and the show and what have you. But you can see how much it hurts him and how much pride he has baked into this character and into this show. So for him to have to acknowledge that it's all an act when the circumstances are real, I mean, it's a really beautiful movie. Like it really works. Got a little
It's very
emotional.
character based, and every character is served in a sense. And like I think because it's so driven by character, like all the story points. I feel like now, I mean, a lot of movies are not like that. It's a bunch of characters going through plot, and they don't really feel like friends. And the ending is spectacular, but I don't care, and I don't remember it 5 minutes later, right? So I think it really is a testament to what's impactful to people, which is seeing people progress from an A to a B. I mean, it seems very simple, but for some reason, I think a lot of the times things are not as resonant. And watching this made me feel like I was in good hands.
Yeah, because
Totally.
people forgot how to make movies. People forgot how to make this kind of movie. And I said that to Phil when I was watching last night. What was the last movie like this? A very high concept studio film that's this effective. And you know, it's funny because not to shit on one particular movie, but I just watched Tag with my son because I show him R-rated movies because I'm a bad father. And Tag is what you're talking about.
Which movie? Sorry, Kenny. Oh, Tag.
Tag is what you're talking about. It's a bunch of people going through plot where the movie tells you they're friends, but there's nothing that makes me think these people are friends.
No.
There's no shared experience. There's no personal history. There's no warmth. There's no comfort. It's just these people who I don't even understand why they'd be in the same room with each other, which I guess is part of the movie, but they to play tag, I guess. But
I mean, to me, I'm like, this is the Seth Rogen phenomenon, not to trash anybody. Like, God bless everyone I've ever been in that movie, any movie like that. But there's a type of comedy that is the mainstream, and it's a bunch of white dudes being funny, and then they interchange the people of color and the women every movie, and they do movies together for 10, 15 years. And I'm like, I'm tired of it. Like, I don't
exactly what
see
happened.
you and your dudes who smoke pot together every weekend. Let's go make a movie. I got an idea. Let's get another hot blonde chick to play your wife. They're the same every time. They don't have any loyalty to the women around them. They're just, except for a couple who happen to be married to people, which is like, that's your security as a job. And like that comedy has influenced all mainstream comedy for the last 10 years. And it's boring.
It's been longer, and it is boring, and it's a problem. It's a problem when I think that, you know, I think 40-year-old virgin works really well. I think Knocked Up works less well. And I think that a movie like 40-year-old virgin has every right to exist, and a movie like 40-year-old virgin, and I'm not saying you don't, but a movie like 40-year-old virgin, you know, is correctly held up as, you know, kind of a high watermark for comedy, for American comedy. It's frustrating that that's the kind of movie that everyone decided to emulate over and over again. And it's one thing of Seth, and I think Seth Rogen's even tired of it because now he's making movies like American Pickle, which are closer to Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's frustrating when people who aren't those people, basically every white guy between the ages of 20 and 40 in this town, decide this is the way to do it. And
But
you forget. You forget that there's more than just a premise, more than 40-year-old guy can't get laid, more than
there was great character in that. That's a character-based comedy, and it's a bunch of executives wanting to hang out with Seth and smoke pot with them. Let's greenlight it, and then the women are like, "Well, that's what my boss wants, so let's greenlight that." And then you're like, women comedy ghetto, or you're a stoner comedy with the same 5 dudes over and over again. And you're totally right. It's a disservice to the audience. And it makes us not excited to go to the movies, to be honest with you. I have not been excited about a comedy in years.
Unfortunately, we have television where, you know, where exciting things have been happening. not just, not just female led, but POC led too, right? So you have, I mean, this isn't new, but you have Fleabag, and you have Girls, and you have Atlanta, and you have Raimi, and you have all these things that are different, and are also character based. It's not just enough to say, we're putting people who look different. Like, there's actually like depth and feeling. So yeah, I think that I think Phil and I are very much on the train that the modern cinematic experience um outside of spectacle is lacking. Outside of spectacle and in indie, I would say, and ulterior driven indie stuff. But
Yeah.
I would also say too, all of this points to how deep the bench is and the cast of this movie as well. I mean, this movie is filled out with so many incredible character actors. I mean, your Sam Rockwell's, your Tony Shalhoub's, obviously Sigourney Weaver, Alan Rickman. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put Tim Allen in that, but he's very good in this movie, playing a role that he should be good at, which is sort of a puffed up chest kind of person. But I was watching this film yesterday, and I tweeted this yesterday too, but like, Tony Shalhoub should be in everything. He is
Oh my God, he's so good. And I did an episode of Monk.
amazing.
He's the
Oh, yeah?
nicest person you have
great.
ever met in your whole entire life. He's
so good
incredible. Just the first look he does when the camera zooms in on him, I'm like, he needs an award just for that look in his eye. That is good acting.
I wanted more of that. I wanted more of 1982 Shalhoub.
There's just moments where he says nothing and he's funny, where he's just eating out of the cheese out of that little cheese snack thing in the ship as they're going down to the planet, and just the glee on his, like, he just seems like it's all just a blast for him. Just even lines like "the ship's falling apart, just FYI." Just like,
you know what I love about that performance so much is I've seen so many things with, quote unquote, like the washed up actor, who's bitter or who's vain or who's, angry or whatever. I've never actually met those people. I've met a lot of washed up actors who are just super fucking nice and super fucking happy that they had their shot and super fucking happy that they can go to a convention and make good money. Like, I've met you work in TV, you see these people all the time. They're all fucking just cool. You're just like, you won't believe how cool that guy is. You won't believe how cool that guy is. And I salute to like the marriage of actor and role, because I think you go either one of two ways. You hire someone who's a lot broader for a role like that, usually, or you hire or you change the characterization of that and make them more bitter. But they really, really nailed that like archetype, which I've never seen.
It's also, I mean, I would argue this was a star-making performance from Sam Rockwell. This felt like the movie that kind of put him on the map. So good. And he's fantastic in it. He almost turned it down, apparently, because he wanted to do an indie film, but of all people, Kevin Spacey's the one who convinced him to do it. We just won't talk about that. But I'll just say that in this movie, Sam Rockwell is so funny and so just perfectly tuned to the role.
He's the plucky comic relief.
He's gleeful. Yeah. And I've seen him, I went to Sundance every year for many years, up until like 2007 or whatever. And like, he was in like 4 movies every time. Sure. And I was like, I forgot that Sam Rockwell was funny and had this amazing, like, sprightly quality about him. It was so good. Also, Rainn Wilson is in one scene in a limo. And he never comes back. I'm like, did he get fired? Was he just limo guy number 3? What happened? Baby Rainn Wilson, what happened? Did he get written out?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sam Rockwell's just tremendous in this movie. So funny. Remember, he was also in Midsummer's Night Dream this year.
Yeah, that's right. He was.
And he did a great job in that too.
Yeah.
Well, not briefly, because he was in the Pyramus and the Thisbe performance. Yeah. So he was so great in that. I mean, I don't think modern Sam Rockwell. I think people think of modern Sam Rockwell and they think 3 billboards and a guy who plays a very specific type of blue collar-ish character, but he has so much depth.
He's so funny. And in the next year, he's in Charlie's Angels as the villain in that one, which I think he does quite well because you kind of don't expect it from him. He's fantastic. I mean, this is one of those movies that obviously I did a little bit of reading on its gestation a little bit. It was supposed to be directed by Harold Ramis, and he wanted it to be Steve Martin he first wanted Alec Baldwin to play the Tim Allen role, which makes sense. But he
Yeah.
turned it down. Then he wanted Steve Martin or Kevin Kline, neither of which feel totally right for me. Then Tim Allen attaches, and that's when Ramis leaves the film. And
when Tim Allen comes, you got to go.
And then Dean Pariseau comes on, and obviously he directs the film. Sigourney Weaver, she had to convince him to give her the role, because obviously, this is a little bit outside Sigourney Weaver's lane. She's phenomenal in it, but I can understand why someone might be like, blonde, buxom, starlet, like it's not necessarily her lane. Would you disagree?
I'm so glad that they
she's great.
did it, because she actually has. If they had just gone with a blonde bimbo 1999 actress, then it would have been a disappointment, because then that's all she is, right? And she has so many layers to her, just in her presence. So she is that character. It was just so perfect, and I forgot about that with her breasts hanging out all the time, and I was like, but thank God they didn't go that Porky's direction. They just went. She's sexy as all hell, and then she has so much behind it. It's such a better decision.
I would also say too, the age thing was right. Like my fear is that, and I don't mean this to sound bad, and maybe it will, but like Heather Graham feels like the person that they would have put in that role necessarily, someone who's very beautiful and can kind of play that role, that kind of ditzy blonde whatever role, and is 15 years too young to be with Tim Allen. Whereas at least these two felt age appropriate, and she's amazing in the role. I mean, she's fantastic.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
She also apparently
what dish?
Dish. Phil, this is you.
I was just going to say that, and it's a funny piece of trivia. Yeah, I know. There's such a funny piece of trivia that I appreciated, which is that according to Sigourney Weaver, Tim Allen was bugging her to sign a piece of the Nostromo, the ship from the Alien films, because he's a huge Alien fan. When she eventually did at the end, and she wrote "Stolen by Tim Allen, loves Sigourney Weaver," and it really pissed him off because she ruined his piece of memorabilia, which I think is great.
Tim Allen is, an interesting guy. Tim Allen is an interesting guy. It's hard to kind of wrap my head around the Tim Allen experience. I'll tell the story very briefly.
Please.
Ooh, dish.
It's a great story.
So I was at a little New Year's Day party for my dad's friend. And at this party, of all people, is Tim Allen. And Tim Allen is, like just standing in the corner, like sunglasses on, hanging out with the tray of food. And I'm texting Phil. I'm like, Tim Allen is here. Should we try to get him on the podcast? And Phil's like, yes, of course. And I'm like, well, that's better said than done. I was joking mostly. So I didn't really have the guts to do anything. So the first thing I did was I took my little 8-year-olds over, 8-year-old twins, and I knew I can get in there by saying, they're Santa Claus fans, and he was wonderful with them. He's like, guys, turn around, because they didn't know who he was. He turned around and he goes, "To infinity and beyond," and they immediately, it was great. So they immediately were like, "Oh my God, it's Buzz Lightyear!" They turn around, Santa Claus, yeah. So then I'm hanging out with my daughter Layla, and I'm like, Layla, would you go and ask Buzz Lightyear if he would be on my podcast? And she's like, sure, why not?
What?
So, this is all real. So my daughter goes up to Tim Allen and she asks, will you be on my dad's podcast? And he's like, well, what's the podcast? She's like, it's a podcast like it's 1999. They talk about the movies in 1999 from here at a New Year's Day party. And he goes, well, he goes, yeah, sure. So she comes back with Tim Allen's office phone number and says,
wow.
And he gives me like a thumbs up, and then I never had the guts to call him.
Well, you're gonna call him, Kenny. We're gonna make this happen. But
I have it on my. This was this New Year, so this was right before COVID.
You're almost from outside the issue, the time limit. You got to get in on this.
He's a lovely man. I've heard very bad things about him, but he's a lovely man. We did talk a little about Galaxy Quest, and the one thing he said was it's his favorite movie he ever did. They talk all the time. Apparently, the cast are all very good friends, he says, And when they were on set, they knew it was, or they believed it was a masterpiece. They believed that they were doing something really special while it was happening, which made me feel good because, I always, and Felicia, you could talk to this, obviously, as a person who's been in films and movies and shows. I always am concerned that something that seems silly on the page and seems silly when you're in wardrobe and seems silly when you're in makeup. How do you convince yourself that something that, where you have to wear an Alan Rickman head prosthetic is not a joke on you and not the kind of thing you're going to be made fun of in your, in on a late night show. And it actually is something that can turn into, an iconic performance, which I would say this is one of Alan Rickman's 4 or 5 most iconic performances.
He's incredible. Yeah. I mean, listen, you work because you need health insurance and you like what you do. I mean, we could probably all be making, I don't know if we'll be making more money. We'd probably make the equivalent, most actors at least, doing something else. So if it becomes a grind, listen, I've had some hour show guest stars I've taken because boy, oh boy, I need that, that health insurance. And you're just hating every moment. And but then I've had amazing experiences where I'm friends with the whole cast, like Buffy, Supernatural, I'll talk to those people forever. Right. So, or the stuff that I've made, I have friendships forever. So the weird thing about movies is it can be a grind and awful, or it could be incredibly fulfilling. And that's why we're here. It's almost like one day, you can do 5 bad jobs. You're like, I know the next one around the corner. It's going to make me feel awesome about my life choices. And so, you just have to have faith that if you're having fun and you feel activated and you're doing the best work you can and you're enjoying yourself, then you're doing a good job. And it didn't feel like anybody here was not just loving going to rehearsal, loving doing take 17 or whatever. That said, I heard that the people who are on the set of Cats really thought they were making a masterpiece. So and that might be the worst thing I've ever seen in my life in a good way. I want to see the butthole cut.
Yeah.
In such a bad way that I'm who can hook me up? So at the same time, you never know.
That movie is hypnotizing in the strangest way. It really is. Yeah.
Who could watch it and be like, this is I'm just like you. It's almost like being in some kind of weird Trump bubble and
Although I wish I could have been there in the moment when Tom Hooper realizes I've made a terrible mistake. I just wish I could have been there in that moment where he's like, oh God, there's no way out.
When do you think that was?
The first previs?
It must be the previews, right?
I don't know. It could have been on set. It could have been day one. I'm not even kidding. It could have been on set. And it could have been I don't know about this. All right, so I've already spent $80 million. I have to spend another 120 to get where I need to get. Oh, what a nightmare! I do not subscribe. And Phil knows this. I do not subscribe to the Cats is cute thing at all. I hate it with the fury of a billion suns. I think it's such the thing that bothers me about the cult of Cats, and I understand it's all ironic, is this doesn't deserve irony. This is the most cynical fucking play of all time, and it deserves to go down in a heaping flame of cat hair.
Here's the thing: you can't fault any of the actors because an actor, I would have loved being on the set. You're an actor and you're used to doing crazy thing on stage. You're like, oh my God, I get to do crazy ass stuff on a movie. This is a revolution. I feel fulfilled as an artist for the first time in my life. I'm singing, I'm dancing. We're showing people beautiful dancing for once. And then but yeah, you're right. Why were they so small on the railroad tracks? That's the one that I just don't understand.
The scale just changed all the time. I will say this though. I remember when they announced that they were doing it, in my head I was like, well, this is going to be terrible. This is a bad idea. You shouldn't do this, right?
The best version is terrible.
It's bad, right? But then I was like, when the trailer came out and I watched the trailer, I was like, it's so much worse than I ever could have possibly imagined. Made it so much better for me. Because I was just like, this isn't just a failure. This is just an unmitigated disaster. Yeah. And everyone looks insane. It's like a fever dream of I don't know.
What other movie of this proportion could you say, oh my God, about? Really, what other movie?
Is that a rhtorical question?
Yeah, Space Jam? What is something you're just whoa?
Space Jam's amazing.
Something that's so crazy. Something that Space Jam's.
Wait, Space Jam just getting thrown out there is like that's before Cats it was Space Jam we all shit
Well, no,
on.
but I think I don't want to speak for Felicia, but I think what she means.
You know who's happy Cats is here? Michael Jordan, because he's so tired of getting shit all over his face.
But I think what Felicia was getting at, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think that, is that the leap of technology and what they were trying to do, which is I think more akin to like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit maybe than to Space Jam, but like this could be a disaster and not work at all, and these two things might not speak to each other.
Oh, and then
I
got the answers.
Okay.
Yeah. Kind of. Oh, you know. I got one. Okay.
Yeah,
Polar Express.
That's what I was
Polar
going to
Express.
say. That's what I was going to say. Yes.
Abomination.
All right, so I was going to say the Zemeckis, exactly. I was going to say that and Beowulf and fucking...
Oh, Beowulf,
Christmas
I forgot
Carol.
about Beowulf.
And Christmas Carol.
Beowulf is the craziest because...
Beowulf is the craziest.
It's crazy. Like at least Polar Express and Christmas Carol built an audience who are going to see it no matter what, like lazy parents who are just trying to like get some peace for 2 hours. Who the fuck is going to watch Beowulf? Creeps who want to see like half naked monster Angelina Jolie motion cap? Okay. So I do have yes, I think you're totally right. I think Polar Express was that. And by the way, I don't think we were on camera when you said that Phil looks a little bit like Sid from
you're looking like
Toy
Sid from Toy Story a little bit right now.
But trying to render humans in the 90s in
was not
CG
great.
was kind of that too. Where it was just go away.
Well, there's a couple of video games like there's LA Noire, which is one of a really great video game.
Yeah, I remember
but
that.
Unfortunately, it just doesn't work. You know, just technologically, it was not good, and that's kind of where I feel maybe that kind of lies.
But I would say with Cats, the difference between Cats and Space Jam and Roger Rabbit, and even the Zemeckis stuff, which is closer to me, is they could have done better. Like this wasn't really a failing of the technology as much as it was a failing of like, oh my God, how'd you get that picture of Phil behind you?
I look better than that kid.
Your teeth are
Felicia
better.
has just put Sid as her background.
Yeah.
I mean, all right. I mean, that's fine. Can I will to your point, Kenny, because I agree with you. I want to say this. I think that what happened, because I read some stuff about the production of Cats, obviously, and that at a certain point, Universal like closed the purse strings. Like they were like, we're not giving you any more money to do this stuff. So some of the close-ups, the fur isn't on their faces at all because quite frankly, they just couldn't afford to do it. There's just stuff that they just at a certain point were like, fuck it. Like it's good enough.
Erase the buttholes and put it out.
Erase the buttholes and get it out into the masses are dying for it.
I'll never forget the moment where you think it's over. I'm like, you get to memories and you're like, oh, she ruined the one reason I want to watch this movie. Why is there so much snot? Just rein it in. That's the only reason to watch this movie is that song.
So much snot.
And then you go farther. And then you're just like, okay, this is over finally. They cut to Judi Dench wearing another cat. And she does a 12-minute monologue to the camera with a
straight to lens,
smile.
straight down the barrel of the lens. Who are just like 20 minutes of cat Judi Dench just talking right at me.
I've never almost rage quit a movie. I almost walked out. I was so angry. I was like, how dare you?
I did, in fact, walk out of Cats.
At what point? At what point, though?
He went with his kids.
I went with my kids. My daughter was very excited, and to this day, they keep telling me like, "Why did you do that to me? Why did you put me through that?" I said 3 days ago. I said to my daughter, "Have you ever seen a bad movie?" She goes, "Yeah, Cats." So
wow.
we walked out like halfway through, right around when like Ian McKellen was lapping at a bowl of milk at like chin level, like that. I think they're like, no, enough. But I did catch like the last monologue a couple nights ago at like 12 o'clock on HBO or something. So I can really, it's awful. But like I also would say, I kind of. I'm going to contradict myself, but like, you're right, Phil. It is mesmerizing. like the little puns all the little cat puns that they have, it's awful and the worst thing you'll ever see in your life, and mesmerizing in its weirdness.
To me, I feel like I wish they had just filmed it on stage. Like then Then just put a bunch of cameras up there, get some close-ups, maybe do some matte paintings behind a couple of people. Like, that's it. And like,
Just put them in the furry leotards like they were on the goddamn stage and just own it. I agree with you 100%.
This is a stage thing. Other than that, or have them be real CGI Pixar cats.
That's what I would have done.
So two quick things, and then we'll talk about Galaxy Quest. But two quick things. The first is I watched a little bit of it on HBO Max the other day, just because I was like, oh, I mean, and it opens in such a like almost Kubrickian Cats. Like it almost feels like Clockwork Orange. Like the lighting and the music, it's very unsettling. Like it starts from a very unsettling place.
Sexually, it's very unsettling through the whole thing.
Well, there's that too, because they're all rubbing each other's groins against each other through most of the movie. That's crazy.
I don't like seeing dogs hump people's legs. It's one of the most repulsive things I've ever done. That's the sensation that I get when I see a small dog humping a person's leg, and then somebody's like, "Oh, they're so randy." I'm like, disgusting. I don't want to see it. That's the emotion I felt for 2 hours when I watched that movie.
Yeah. So I went to see it. They did at the Alamo, they did a rowdy screening of it so you could talk through it, which was, I ultimately believe, the only way that film should be seen in a theater. And they had the drinks were all milk-based drinks in cat dishes that you would drink out of. Like it was, they really went all out. Wow. But the best part, or one of the best parts, was the moment you mentioned, Kenny, where Ian McKellen laps milk out of a dish. Someone in the audience screamed, "What a fucking pro."
That's good.
So yeah, I'm going to give a synopsis of Galaxy Quest for our listeners who might not have seen the film.
I want to say one more thing.
The start of a 1970s sci-fi show.
I want to say one more thing, Felicia. The way you feel about dogs humping legs is the way I feel about mixed milk-based drinks. Milk is disgusting to me if you can see it. So it's like I can't even like the idea that you have a whole movie where all the characters have to drink milk is so gross to me.
I will tell you something. The one thing that makes me not love my daughter a little bit is when she drinks used cereal milk. She drinks it with such relish. And it makes me. Oh,
it's the best part.
We're done here. That's the end of this podcast.
It's the grossest thing. I would rather see somebody lick some snot.
Me too, no question. I will not podcast with a cereal milk drinker. I can't believe you mimed it. Ladies and gentlemen, he mimed it.
Anyway.
I'm gonna two-hander.
Don't get Kenny started on cheese either. Felicia hates cheese.
You have a lactose issue, huh?
Well, I can eat anything. I like ice cream. I won't drink it. I won't eat it once it's melted.
Oh God, eating melted ice cream. My daughter does that. I'm like, I love you, but right now it's hard.
Yeah.
Wait, I don't understand.
You're crazy, Phil.
I don't understand what's happening right now.
I eating ice cream for me is a race. Because if it actually starts melting, it's done. I will throw it out.
100%. I'm on your side. Yeah, I do love cheese, but I'm 100% on your side.
Can I ask? I have a question since I guess we're talking about this. But what about cream-based soups?
No, not for me.
I have a texture Rubicon Valley akin to Beowulf when you're between a smoothie and sort of instant potato kind of like a texture. That is when I will vomit onto you. So yeah. Like a vichyssoise,
so like cream of mushroom soup. Cream mushroom
rather
soup.
Die.
It needs to be way watery.
What about like leek or potato soup? All right. Well, this episode definitely holds the record of dry heaving on Mike, I think.
Also, how happy I am. This is the happiest I've ever been.
It is the happiest I've ever been.
For once, you have an ally.
Nobody agrees with my crazy shit, but like this is human nature. You shouldn't be eating this disgusting gruel. It's like this is what Oliver Twist is about. How food of that texture is not fit for human consumption. Literally, that's it.
If it's either me or cream of wheat of dying, I'll probably just bye.
That's how I feel. I'm not even kidding. That's how I feel.
All right. I'm going to give the synopsis of Galaxy Quest. The stars of a 1970s sci-fi show, now scraping a living through reruns and sci-fi conventions, are beamed aboard an alien spacecraft. Believing the cast's heroic on-screen dramas are historical documents of real-life adventures, the band of aliens turn to the ailing celebrities for help in their quest to overcome the oppressive regime of their solar system. The movie was written by David Howard and Robert Gordon and directed by Dean Pariseau. It opened on December 24th, 1999 in fourth place against The Talented Mr. Ripley, Any Given Sunday, and The Green Mile. It would go on to make $90 million on a $45 million budget. Galaxy Quest has 90% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and 79% from audiences. So when you saw this film, Felicia, whenever that might very well have been, did you like it back then? Did it leave an impression on you back then? I mean, what was...
I thought it was funny. I love comedy. I'm not an actor because I want to cry and get an Oscar. You know,
Sure.
like I've had to cry a lot in I could, but that's not what, I mean, I love making people laugh. Now, at the time, I was told that I was a dramatic actress. It wasn't until I moved to LA and did improv that I was like, oh, I could do comedy, even though every single thing I ever loved, from like Family Ties to like every sitcom in the world, was my favorite. Right. So I think that comedy and comedy movie, you know, movies that were comedies were really important to me. At the time, I was not like a fan person, you know, like I make part of my living doing conventions, and like it's been a huge part of my career and my life, and I love them so much. So revisiting this, because I saw this movie before all this happened in my career, and it's been a long time. So like seeing it now, I'm like, oh, this is really a love letter, and it's very respectful, and it's not needing to deconstruct this, and it's not marginalizing fandom in a way that I thought, oh, this is really cool. It's really before its time in a way.
Yeah, I texted Kenny this, but it really is a Valentine to the fans. It's a Valentine to Star Trek. It's clearly a love letter. The people that made this love this world. It's not sarcastic. It's not. The heart of this movie, I think that if this movie was made today, and Lord knows if this film would even be made today, quite honestly.
No,
I feel like it would be jaded. I feel like it would be sarcastic. I feel like it wouldn't have the sort of just wearing its heart on its sleeve that this film has.
It wouldn't be kind. There's a lack of kindness, and I'm sure that some of the people would have like crazy weird kinks. One would be a furry. There'd be some humping. You know, like it would have to be exactly a dog dry humping another dog person.
Alien of some sort.
Dog alien. Yeah. So it would be in the tone that would be much more jaded and much more like edgy, which everything doesn't need to be edgy without being saccharine. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like there isn't just one tonality, and I feel like everything's in a category comedy wise now. It's just kind of sad.
Well, Kenny, I actually... What I was going to say is that if in the spectrum of the comedies that we got in 99, you know, we have Being John Malkovich, we have Election, but we also have Big Daddy, we also have South Park. Like the spectrum of it is pretty broad, but I think this film falls squarely in the middle of all of that in the best possible way. But I don't know what you think.
It's the best. It's the platonic ideal of a studio comedy, and what I mean is, so the word edgy gets thrown around a lot. And I think edgy is often used, like executive speak, as a stand-in for cool. And I think all anyone really wants in this business is to be cool. For the most part, it's just, and I don't necessarily even think that's a bad thing, right? Like that in and of itself isn't bad, because the word cool doesn't have a negative connotation or any kind of connotation other than, you know, it's just kind of confident. And if you really break that down, the coolest thing you can do is make a good movie. Right? Straight up. The coolest thing you can do is make a good movie. There's nothing inherently cool about Pixar. Pixar is inherently very uncool. You know, like it's inherently about emotions. It's generally about family. It's about relationships. It's about adventure, growing up and being scared and getting over it. All these things, feeling-y things that aren't cool. But what's cool is making a really good movie. So what I love about Galaxy Quest is it avoids all the obvious targets, right? Like making fun of quote unquote nerds and fanboys and things like that, or even making fun of the aliens, who would be a very obvious target because they're, you know, they're ultimately they have just lost a big battle and they're kind of socially awkward and all these things. They don't pick on any of those things. They pick on the coolest people in the room. They pick on the people who are, you know, full of themselves, people who have been successful, the people who are vein, and it doesn't sacrifice any of the humor. Like, I guess something that kind of struck me, and it's always struck me about this movie, is this strikes me as a movie that when critics went into it, they probably didn't want to like it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's
Sure.
interesting. Yeah.
They probably were like, Tim Allen, a Tim Allen movie, period. That's a strike against it. Sigourney Weaver in a broad comedy, probably not something they were feeling in 1999. Star Wars,
Alan Rickman in a broad comedy. Like, what's that? I mean,
with that ridiculous head thing. Star Wars, not particularly cool in the culture at that point. No one was talking about Star Wars in 1999, right?
Well,
So
Star Trek.
Excuse me, Star Trek in 1999. No one was talking about Star Trek in 1999, and they were kind of like, pointing a gun directly where a lot of these critics live, which is a lot of these critics were fans of Gene Roddenberry and that show, and they probably went in saying like, this might be a shot directly at me. Mm-hmm. So to overcome all that and have 90% of Rotten Tomatoes and become kind of a critical darling and something that's endured through our culture is kind of remarkable to me. The only way to do it is just have a really fucking strong film.
Well, and I would also say too, and I want to get obviously all your opinions on the tone that they're striking in this is really tricky. I mean, they are really trying to thread a needle in terms of like the effects and the makeup and the production design are all in this space of being a little cheesy, but also sort of state of the art at times. All the makeup of the aliens, the evil aliens and their ship, that stuff looks incredible. But like the ship, like the bridge of their ship kind of looks like shit. Like they try to find this balance of being able to thread that stuff. And I think the movie that came to mind as I was watching it was Men in Black, which also kind of is a little bit more state of the arty, and it's trying to be cooler because it's Will Smith and he's cool and all that. But like this movie is trying to have fun in a sandbox where it doesn't, to your point, Kenny, it's making fun of the right people. It's keeping that tone afloat. And there were apparently earlier cuts of this film that got an R rating, where I think there might have been more of the things that you were referring to, Felicia, of alien dogs humping, and apparently there was like a doctor on board, and all of his stuff was basically cut because it was all a bunch of like proctology jokes and like probing jokes and like things that were just sort of like a little bit more blue and a little bit sort of like we don't. And I think, whether or not Dean Pariseau might have been a little bit pissed off about losing some fucks and shits and what have you in order to get the PG rating, the film is better off for it. I didn't need any of that stuff in this movie. I don't know how you guys felt about it.
No, I feel like it's a very I love a good butthole joke. No, I mean that's I'm known for my butthole jokes. So
and you want the butthole cut, obviously. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think when you're talking about cool, it's a very interesting thing because I think that word kind of goes back to what I think is endemically problematic and has institutionalized white male privilege in this industry, is that they're in power and they want to be cool with their friends. They want to show up to parties and say, oh, you made that cool comedy, that edgy comedy. And so that tonality it's a social phenomenon, but also a creative phenomenon in that those are the people in power picking the people who get to make things, right? And kindness is not cool to those dudes. Mm-hmm. So and that's why women increasingly get shoved into lower, they go to indie films, they go to animation, children's animation is, so it's a very hierarchical thing where you can see people who are not white males being stacked up into the lower prestige, lower cool areas of entertainment. And that I think is inherently a problem. And you can't change that unless you have people in power who their cool is something different than that cool. And I don't think that's going to happen within my lifetime, but hopefully, it's changing for the better. And 100%, I think the kindness and the PG-ness of it actually make it so much more appealing because you can just relax and be like, this is something we can all enjoy together. And it didn't feel lame for it,
Yeah, I mean, like Kenny, you watched it with your son, right? And I know you show him R-rated movies anyway, but I do think that because you're a cool dad, you're like the coolest dad.
You're the cool dad.
Yeah, I'm the cool dad. That's right.
But didn't you feel a little bit? And I don't know how you feel about this as a parent watching it, but did you feel a little more at ease? Were you able to just kind of like just enjoy the film for what? Yeah,
nothing bad. I mean, to me, I have I have like a newfound respect for filmmakers who go ahead and make a movie that's something you can watch with your kids.
Yeah.
I think that's great to have those movies, and I think it's great to know that nothing bad's going to happen within the context of the movie. I don't think that matters ultimately that much. I think this is a better movie for everybody because of it. I do. I think it's just a better movie. I think that there's something within every viewer knowing that it's not going to do something to you that makes you uncomfortable no matter what, that puts you at ease. I think that's okay. Like I like writing for, I'll put it this way. I started on a premium network and I'm currently on a premium network. And do whatever you want. I think that's terrible. I hate it because because people naturally go to places that don't necessarily serve the story and will put the audience ill at ease. Now, of course, there's some shows that need to be like that. Shows from The Sopranos to Succession to Game of Thrones. I get that. But I love having the guardrails up, not just as a writer, but as an audience member. I love knowing that this ride is not going to take me to a place. Just to use Tag as an example, Tag does not have to be R-rated. Tag is about grown-ups playing tag. Okay? But because it's R-rated, I understand that they had a certain thing they wanted to do. They wanted to have adults be adults, so they wanted to say fuck and they wanted to drink. They wanted to have Jake Johnson be a stoner character. I get that. But because of that, they tacked on an entire miscarriage subplot to the third act of this movie. And once you have the
Hilarious.
It's not a go-to, guys. It's not a go-to.
It's unbelievable. And once you have the R rating on there, you almost feel like you have to do this crazy shit. But it's it takes you so far out of the movie.
But I'll tell you right now, like I've produced a lot of animation. I'm a producer on several animated projects. I've pitched so many times with animation, and my number one feedback is it's not edgy enough, or it's not kid enough. And this is actually, that on top of pitching things where there's like, one time I remember pitching this project I love so much, and it's Comedy Central, and the woman executive, when I mentioned the word vampire, she almost looked like I took a shit on the table because she hated geek stuff. They obviously don't think it's cool. And and at the same time, for animation, it's even more striated because you have to be able to watch it with an 8-year-old, or you have to have cartoons fucking. So like there is no middle ground, which I think is actually why anime is so popular, because anime actually is the middle ground because it's not being made in the States, which I think Netflix is probably, the best at kind of breaking that barrier. But at the same time, still, it's very segmented into safe, unsafe. And I think that kind of colonization is the thing that ruins the opportunity to make something like this again.
I mean, I think that, I certainly don't want to speak for you guys, but I know that when you sit down to write something, generally speaking, you don't put guardrails on yourself. You want to just write it, see what comes, and you'll figure it out. You can, pull yourself back or cut things, what have you. Something happened in this film, which I think is really interesting, which is I guess they shot it even, perhaps, which is that at the end of the film, when the spaceship crashes into the convention center, right? I remember thinking to myself, like, I feel like that would probably kill some people. Like, that looked really dangerous. Like, I remember thinking that. Yeah. And then reading that they shot a version of it where a couple people got decapitated by various things coming out of the ship. And I'm just like, that's just misreading the tone of this movie, right? Like, that's just thinking, let's just go for that. Like, let's go for the crazy. Like, I'm sure that there is a version of that where there's an audience for that, but like, you don't need it. Like, you just have to know where where the needle is for the film. And I think they ultimately found it.
By the way, that's a pretty interesting little tidbit to me, because there's clearly a version of this movie that's like Peter Jackson pre Lord of the Rings, right? That is wild, right? There's so many, when you bring aliens into the equation, anything can happen. When you're spoofing on Star Trek, anything can happen. And, there's very few movies from 1999 I like more than South Park. So I'm certainly not afraid to enjoy a movie that roasts all the sacred cows. But just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? And I think I really strongly do think there's more artistry in doing it without the crutch of let's cut some heads off, let's kill some people here, let's have a doctor who does anal probes because that's what you expect out of aliens. And I think what they found was something really artistic ultimately.
I think
it's
we're
so good. There's
sorry,
not one line that's wasted. There's not one character that isn't served. It's just, and it is kind. Like there's not one nerd that you're like, oh, look at that stupid nerd. You're relating to every character, even one-liner people. And I think that's really sweet and something that you feel safe as an audience member. You're not being laughed at. You are laughing with it.
How about the sweetest moment of the whole movie being when Tim Allen tells Enrico Colantoni that he is the captain of this ship. He is the commander of this group. This guy, how did you find? I mean, he's my favorite actor anyway. But how did you find a character in
He's
that
so good.
in Mathesar? How did you find that? Oh,
yeah, Mathesar. I mean, it is again and I'm sure you can speak to this better than we can, Felicia. But like, that's a real tone thing, right? Like that tips into caricature and falls apart if you're not absolutely locked into the character. The way he laughs, the way he cries, like all of this stuff is so close to being too much. Can you speak to that?
Yeah,
Sort of
but
what that was like as an
I mean,
actor?
I read when I was watching this on Amazon Prime, and they have those little X-ray things, and it was like that was done on set. The way he talked was not actually in the script. He came up with that, and they were like, "Oh, all the aliens should talk like that." And I thought that was really fascinating because as an actor, it's so hard to make a bold choice like that and not just fall flat in your face. And that's why actors have to be a little crazy, because it's like, I'm just going to do something crazy right now, and hopefully you like it.
Yeah.
And you're not encouraged to do that in general because you're kind of on rails. Just do what you need to do and get through it. So the fact that he brought that, and I can't imagine him speaking normally, quote unquote, like a human being, and having it be as funny. And yeah, they're like SNL characters, but like, because the writing serves them so well, you actually feel super excited that Tony Shalhoub and what's her face get together at the end, and like
Missy Pyle. Yeah.
Missy Pyle. So I loved it, and it is really a class. I can't wait to show it to my daughter when she's 8 and doesn't watch R-rated movies.
Just don't run out like I did. I ran out too early.
So I just want to quickly. We've hit on a bunch of the plot, but just sort of the big moments of essentially, the film opening in the convention center, which I love because you're seeing these actors that are just worn thin. They don't want to be doing this shit anymore. There's that amazing moment when Alan Rickman puts the trench coat over his head and tries to run out of there. Like there's stuff like that that's great. Ultimately, the conceit of the film is that, Tim Allen is approached by these aliens at this convention. He thinks they're just fans or, have created some sort of thing. They teleport him to this spaceship. He thinks it's all a bit. He fires some missiles at a real alien spaceship and thinks that all is well. They teleport him back to Earth. He's obviously shaken by this crazy, weird teleportation device. He goes to the rest of his cast and says, "You need to come with me." And then the entire cast is teleported up there. This is also one of my favorite Tony Shalhoub moments when he gets teleported in and he goes, "That was a hell of a thing."
It's also great. He also misses all like the reveals there, right? He doesn't realize that they're like aliens who actually have these, kind of Men in Blackian bodies under. So when he gets together with Missy Pyle, he has no idea he's getting together with a
so good.
Yeah, like an octopus person.
So I just want to quickly say, just to pause for a quick second and say, I saw this film in '99 at a theater at midnight with 2 friends. We knew nothing about this film. We were bored one night and we were like, what is this movie? It was at a multiplex in Toronto. We sat down really knowing nothing and just howled through the entire fucking thing. But the moment that really killed us is the moment that you just mentioned, Kenny, where Tony Shalhoub is kissing Missy Pyle, and then all of her tentacles start to come from under the frame. He's then pulled down, and just Sam Rockwell going, "Oh no, that's not right." It's just those jokes, which are, I don't know, like they're throwaways.
Yeah.
But the throwaways are gold in this movie. Unbelievable.
Also, how long is this movie? It's like an hour and a half, right?
It's like an hour 40, yeah.
Thank God.
It'd It'd be 2 hours and 20 minutes if it came out today.
It'd be 2 hours and 20
Oh,
minutes
I know.
now. And like, I'm tired. It's just tiring. It's just
Yeah.
be a movie or be a TV show. I don't, it's movies are out of control right now. They've lost their, what they should be. I don't know. If you're going to watch a comedy, it's just kind of, it's a disintegration of format in a way, but
Totally.
also this one made me admire it because it was so tight. It was so concise, but also beautifully crafted. And they got it done. They didn't keep everybody's cute improv at the end of the scene. They're like, oh my God, it's so funny. Just cut it. Okay.
Well, it's funny because I'm watching the AFI 100 with some friends every Saturday night as a pandemic thing on Zoom. And the thing that's hit us the most as we've been watching these films is they know when they're done. They get the fuck out when they're done. Like the story's over, credits.
Yeah.
Like there's so much padding on movies today. So part of it is tempolitis and needing these set pieces that they spend 20, 30, $50 million on some crazy video game-esque action sequence that they can't pull from the movie now because it's too expensive. So it all just becomes just far too long. But yeah, get out. The movie's done. They got to the convention center. It's over. Like move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they satisfied every character. Every single character had a great emotional arc within 1 hour and 40 minutes. It's just, God bless them.
They also, Guy's bit, which is that he's afraid that he's the red shirt that's going to die, is one of the best runners, because at one point he says, I wasn't even supposed to be here. I'm the 6th crew member. I'm clearly expendable. And then when they're flying down to the rock planet, and he's like, I changed my mind. I want to go back. At first, I thought I was going to be the guy who dies on the ship, back on the ship. But now I think I'm the guy who's going to die on the planet. Like, it's great stuff.
I think they could have done even more with that. That is so funny and so rich, but Felicia's making this point. I just want to kind of double down on it. It's not that hard to establish emotional depth for your secondary characters. It's not that hard to start them here, have them learn something, have them conquer their fear, and have them end up here. Like you see it with Daryl Mitchell's character. In the beginning, he's faking how. That's such a good bit. He's faking how to drive the ship, and he's crashing against the wall. I mean, that's brilliant. And then he learns how to do it at the end.
It's so funny.
It's so funny, and he's so great in that too. Daryl Mitchell is like in a ton of shit when we were growing up, and he had a really bad accident, and he's now paralyzed from the waist down. But he's been in every season of NCIS New Orleans, and he's had shows built around him. And he's a big advocate. I think this is kind of important. He's a big advocate for actually casting differently abled people as people in those roles.
Oh, amazing!
And it's interesting because he had a big career before. So he keeps getting cast in those roles, but so many people, so many of those roles aren't cast with people who actually have the illness or have the disability that's portrayed in the show. So I think he's become like kind of like an important actor, an important person in this town, as one of the foremost differently abled people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned one of his best bits is as they're trying to leave the station, he's scraping the ship along the side of it goes on for so long. It's great stuff. They get to the rock planet, they see these cute aliens, and then all the aliens turn on one of the weaker ones and eats it.
But just one thing, why it's such a great moment? Because it hints at what these actors are capable of destroying. It really it really in a tactile way gets you to understand what's at stake here. Okay, we didn't blow up the ship here because we were in a controlled environment. But if you let these idiots in charge of anything that can blow up or anything that could blow someone else up, we were fucked. I love it as a moment.
It's great.
I love it. Yeah.
It's also, I think that when those little aliens turn on the other one and eat it, it's also a moment when they realize that their lives are actually physically in danger. I mean, you then have Sigourney Weaver saying, quick, we have to go before one of those things eats Guy, which I think is great because
And that is great.
But it's just, and then we have sort of this, to your point, Kenny, and this is why the script is so tight. It's that it's slowly but surely becoming more and more severe, right? Like the stakes are growing as the movie is progressing, right? Like at first they think it's a bit, and then it's like, oh, wait a second. And then they realize that everything is hinging on their performances from the show. So like Tony Shalhoub now has to teleport someone based on hand movements he did based on
So
nothing
good.
back when
So
he
good.
did the television show. Right. So it's like all of a sudden this phoned in performance that existed back, however many years earlier is now a life or death situation. Like that's the genius of this movie.
It really, it's almost like, I mean, I don't know what kind of research, but it's like you have to be inside the fan's head, the fan of the show's head. You need to be on set on one of these shows when people are bitching that they, like half the actors who do this stuff, especially the information dump. I'm always hired as the girl who knows all the technical issues, and I do like monologues of technical
Sure.
stuff because I specialize in that. I'm really good at memorizing that stuff. But like how many times I've been on set where, basically people do not know their lines at all because they keep going up on these things.
Right.
So there's a lot of actors on these show where the mumbo jumbo comes in. They're like, "Ooh." And then the cue card. And so kind of highlighting that, it requires kind of an inside look, I think,
Sure.
on being on a set too. So I think it's just brilliant on so many levels.
It really, and on top of all of it, it's incredibly funny. Like we have the moment where Tony Shalhoub transports this alien creature onto the holodeck, but it's inside out, and then it explodes. And there's this, so now you're just like, well, what are the chances that this is going to work? And then, obviously he has to teleport Tim Allen, and you have this again speaks to the emotion, which is that Tim Allen's like, I trust you, I have faith in you, I know you can do this. Like this is the stuff that, it's layered and it's going for so much more than another movie, which would just kind of, these are easy jokes, I guess, to some degree.
And
then you have the scene.
The other thing I really this is more of a general point, but just another thing that I love about this that you're speaking to is I think it's important when you come up with a premise to find A stories, B stories, C stories, runners, everything that can only be told within the premise and the world that you have built. These are not things, these things we're talking about, they don't work anywhere else, but they work so perfectly here. You could only tell the stories you're talking about, Felicia, in a movie like this. And in a movie specifically like this, because you couldn't have a believable world where aliens rebuilt the exact ship. It makes sense to them because they don't have any concept of our movies and TV. They just think they're historical documents. They just think these are actually your Earth's heroes. And it's so internally consistent that I love it so much in terms of like everything within the story makes sense within this story. And I'm like tickled.
Well, I think
watching
a
movies
lot
like
of the
this.
times it's like when you have a high concept kind of twist on something, it tends to, it tends to get very plot heavy, right?
Yeah.
And so I think because everything started from, okay, we have this twist, what would these characters actually have experienced and bring to this movie versus like, what do we want them to go through? And I think that was my problem with Star Trek. J.J. Abrams is fucking amazing, but like, for me, the modern Star Trek movies are very much like, well, they're not as based at much a character. It's all very much, it's that sort of Hollywood character. You have the main dude who has a problem, and then everyone's kind of serving him, and you have sort of like, oh yeah, let's give them something, but it's not organic, and you don't invest in them. You're invested in the spectacle of it. Versus what Star Trek was to me and is to me is characters relating to each other, being family with problems, right? And that's not what the modern Star Trek movies are. They're wonderful and they're fun to watch, even though all the extras are white, if you notice, and all the men in authority extras are white men. All the people in authority are white men extras. Watch it. But there are issues for me that Star Trek is not spectacle to me. It is character.
Right.
And I think that's where Galaxy Quest got it so right. And Star Trek is a different beast.
I fully agree. And yeah, I would also say too that the concept that you're speaking of, like a high concept thing like this, I think today would have to answer all sorts of rules and questions, and it would get bogged down in explaining itself all the time. This movie understands quite simply, like this is the premise there, and then you're off to the races and you don't really need to explain anything anymore.
The rules are answered. The rules are answered. The rules are answered in context. The rules are answered by people actually having to do things and then understanding that it's going to work this way or that way.
Yeah.
You don't have to have someone come out and say, these are the 6 things you have to understand about the world, which, by the way, I don't even hate when it does happen. I don't hate clarity. I'm totally down with clarity. But that's kind of a lesser form of storytelling. I think what you were talking to, Felicia, that really, really speaks to why this movie is so brilliant. All right, you take these characters, you put them in a situation that's completely beyond their control, a situation that they're essentially mercenaries in a war between two other entities, right? Mm-hmm. And they're living in a simulation almost controlled by one of them. Yet, the entire story is driven by the decisions of our characters. It's all driven by people we care about. And that is the genius, and that's what's so instructive about this movie from a writing and a filmmaking standpoint. It's yes, things can happen to a character. Yes, characters can react, but when you're getting into the meat of the narrative, you have to have the people you care about driving the story and making decisions.
I would also say, too, to that point, to piggyback on what both of you're saying, is that the jokes also help tell the rules of the universe. I mean, you have that great moment when they're like talking about Gilligan's Island and Mathesar's like, good. Those poor souls. You know what I mean? So like right there, you're like, well, it's not just this show. They think all television shows are historical documents.
Right. And I love that. Yeah, well, it's also like, I don't know if you guys, I fantasize a lot about time traveling and realize how shitty it would be because I love reading history more than anything. But it would, as a woman, like, don't do it. It's a terrible idea. Sure. But I'm always like, wow, who would be? And I'm like, oh, a time travel show or a book is so fun. What would be the best person to time travel back? And you're like, okay, Bear Grylls would probably be a good one. But would you want to see a person who played a cave person in a bad play? Like, that's more fun. That's the comedy thing. Sure. Or you do a drama of Bear Grylls going back to like caveman times.
Right. Yeah. I'd watch that. Yeah.
I would watch both of those because I really like time travel. Okay, for the record.
I love time travel. It's the best.
We're essentially at the end here. But earlier in the film, we have the moment when Jason bumps into Brandon and they swap communicators. So now at the end of the film, Jason realizes that he has a way to communicate with Brandon, who's played by Justin Long in his first movie role. Wow. And he's fantastic in it. And now you have sort of, and this kid is now the key to them surviving this entire ordeal. And he walks them through the ship's core and how to sort of what he thinks the Omega-13 is, which is essentially a time travel. Speaking of your favorite thing, Felicia, a time travel device.
Quantum leap. Why is there not a redo?
That's a very good question.
Oh,
it
doesn't make any sense.
I have questions about that.
You probably have some. Okay.
But I do think that there's sort of this great moment when they're walking through and Brandon's like, I can't believe you're actually seeing the Omega-13. Like, it must be beautiful. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's just a fan. And then they look up and they see this beautiful coil of I guess, time travel matter of some sort. And then he walks them through this thing. And I'm curious about your thoughts here, because this is really the only time when they go to this well, and I'm appreciative of it, which is they walk into this room where there's these chompers or these fucking giant metal things that are there for no other reason than just because it will look cool on television and it's a good thing for them to get through. And then Sigourney Weaver she clearly screams, fuck that, but they bleep over it and she says, screw that or something like that.
Yeah.
And Gwen says, this episode was very badly written. The person who wrote this should die.
Love it.
Now, I love that joke. The reason I bring it up is I think in a weaker film, they would have gone to that well a lot more. More of the like, winking at the camera, acknowledging that somebody wrote this television show, acknowledging all those sort of things. And I love that they don't do that.
But I think their journey is appreciating what they have a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? All of them, because a lot of them are not wanting to be there, don't think highly of what they've done in their career. And having that fan help show them how awesome it is. That's almost like a reversal in a way that I think is really sweet. And so, that sort of self-referential stuff is less, thank God it's a little bit less like, because then you're really getting meta and people don't really, I know my cousin doesn't know how I work. They don't understand why I don't work every day. They're like, well,
Sure.
she was busy for a couple years. What happened? Like they don't understand how. They're like, why does it take so long? So people don't really understand. They don't really care, right? They know actors, but they only know them. They don't need to get into the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah.
So I think that they did, like you said, like, I don't know how as an actor you trim all these different layers and then make perfection without like going off in one direction that's too much. And maybe it was in the script and they narrowed it down. It was just masterful editing in a way.
Well, I would also say too that Kenny and I don't know how you feel about the movie Scream, Felicia. I don't know if you're a fan or not a fan of that movie.
I don't watch a lot of scary movies. I enjoyed it, but I remember seeing it, and I think I went in the theater at the time. I was like, oh, this is fun. It's like funny, scary, because I don't like horror films.
But I think there's a version of this movie that's as much of a commentary on Star Trek.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily think that movie's bad, but I'm just glad they didn't.
It's very self-aware.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
I think that Scream is what Scream should be, and Galaxy Quest is what Galaxy Quest could be. A good satire or a good spoof functions also as a good version of the thing that it's satiring or spoofing. Yeah, I would go so far as to say I think Scary Movie functions as a good horror movie in its own way.
That's a good movie. I'm sorry. It's fun. I
think it is. And I think it has an interesting kind of fun twist ending. Like that they put thought in beyond like what would be the silliest thing to happen. So I think that it would be weird, to me at least, if Star Trek was dealt with the way Scream is dealt with. But I also love the Justin Long twist on it because I think that is wish fulfillment in its own way.
Yeah. When exactly. He's the fanboy.
Yeah. And when you're really on the inside of these fandoms, it stops actually being about enjoying the piece of art or the serialization or the serialized thing that's happening. And it starts being about writing fan fiction in your head or writing fan fiction actually in real life, and the dream is to be up inside of it the way he was at the end of this movie. The fact that he thinks it's real, like, or that I think is a little misunderstanding of what fans feel, but to actually be able to affect the narrative, that's a fucking dream. So I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and they did it in a way
and
that
essentially they're able to crash the plane into. Yes, very sure. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm just saying they crashed. I know everything they did with that character was empathetic and not feeling, it's a nerd. They have posters in their well and they're over 20. Like that kind of thing, which is so. For me, I've tried to sell many. I don't pitch TV anymore as a writer because I'm just like, I'm done. I can't be rejected anymore. But so many times I try to pitch female characters who are fans of things, right? And I'll get really close, and then I'm like, I really think they truly don't understand that there's a huge contingent out there who would love to see themselves in a movie like that. And yet, I think, especially when mainstream Hollywood looks at fans, they look at an other to be either exploited or kind of made fun of in a way from a Big Bang perspective. Certainly treating Justin Long's character like a Big Bang character would have taken the heart away from this movie. And I really appreciate that about it.
Well, sometimes it's hard.
Go ahead.
Sometimes it's hard, I think, for Hollywood to lose sight of its or to distance itself from its roots, right? The roots of Hollywood are it's carnivals and it's things like that. And the audience are marks, the audience are rubes, the audience are morons who buy into this shit and who are willing to spend money on your fakery. What's happened over the last 120 years is those rubes and marks and morons became the ones who are actually writing the stuff. And the ones who are actually in the stuff and the ones who are actually directing and producing the stuff. And the people who we find so detestable are the people who forget that they were once, the consumers of these products. They were once Justin Long. And they were, like that. The people who now look down their nose at fans, it's insane to me. And I've said this many times on this podcast. All we're doing is writing stories for the people who actually like our shit. That's all you're doing. To look down your nose at the people who actually like your shit and paying you for it, you're You're a monster.
You're an idiot. Yeah, you're a monster. I think there's two Justin Long moments that I just wanted to highlight really quickly. The first is when he first gets contacted by Jason on the communicator, and Brendan's like, and Jason says, "I'm sorry if I was curt with you earlier." And Brendan's like, "It's okay. I mean, I get it. I'm not an idiot. Like, I know it's not real." And he's like, "Actually, it's all real." He's like, "I knew it." Like, I think there's something
I like that.
great about that exchange. I also love that right in the middle of when the shit's hitting the fan, it cuts to him taking the garbage out because his mom forces him to take the garbage out. And it's just really sweet. Like, it's funny and it's sweet. It's really good. I also think that it's worth highlighting here. You know, in some of my reading, this was obviously a DreamWorks movie, and I think that Spielberg took an interest in this script or an interest in this project, and you do sense that, unlike something like Shrek, which is so jaded and so snarky about everything, you could sense Spielberg's fingerprints on this a little bit in terms of all of that sort of stuff, of the big heartedness of it. But yeah, I mean, so basically the ship crashes into the convention center. They all come out of the ship, and the fans think that this is all part of the show. They incinerate the bad guy with a ray gun, which is great. And Jason obviously pulls the whole cast onto the to the front of the stage with him, and you recognize sort of the family component of it, and then we get this sort of promo for the sequel to the movies or the show that would go on in the future, and Sam Rockwell has a ridiculous character name, and it's great,
so good.
And yeah, I mean, it's really great. And, you know, I did a bit of reading. The film was
I got choked up. I got you when Sam Rockwell gets the and, you get choked up. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. I did a little bit of reading, and, you know, I think a few years ago there was an announcement, and it might still be, that Paul Scheer is doing an Amazon TV show based on this.
I saw that. It was a couple years ago, so I don't know if that's
that's happening.
I will say that the most depressing thing to do, guys, as an actor, is to watch Amazon Prime with that X-ray thing and look at all the day players in every single one of these movies around 99, 2000, whatever, and you click on their IMDb, and maybe 2 or 3 break out. Most of them have clearly a commercial headshot on there, and they're still sticking around, but they have not worked since 2002. It is so depressing.
It's real grim. I suggest you not watch things with the X-ray thing on.
I know, but I can't say. I was like, where are they now? Why? She had one line. Where is she now? I'm like, oh no, she did a Law and Order guest star in 2007, and that's it. I'm like, oh no.
Don't put yourself through that.
Yeah. When you start doing it with like the executive story editors on the shows you like, then you know you've really gone too far.
Oh yeah. Or a director. I actually worked with a director early in my career, and he hasn't worked in 15 years, and I was like, thank God. But rarely that happened.
So at the end of our episodes, Felicia, we do a rating system where we rate the film from 0 to 99, 0 being the lowest, 99 being the highest. We rate it from back in 99, then we rate it before we did this podcast, and then we rate it after the podcast if the podcast changed your opinion in one way or another. I know it's a lot of numbers. I'll go first.
Wait, what?
And you'll understand.
You go first. Yeah.
I'll go first.
Do it.
It's very simple.
Yep.
In 99, as I mentioned, I saw this at midnight with a group of friends, and it was one of my favorite movie-going experiences ever. I probably would have given it a 90 back then, maybe even a 92. Like, I loved it. And the film has really honestly only grown in my esteem. I think I'm at like a 94 now, maybe even a 95. Like, I think it's my favorite comedy of 99. And I know that Being John Malkovich and Election are probably considered comedies, but they're obviously much more. Not to say that Galaxy Quest isn't, but like pure laughs, pure comedy. Like this is my favorite comedy of 99, I think. Kenny, do you want to go?
Sure. I don't think I saw this in 99, but I saw this pretty soon after, probably like 02, 03. I always thought it was a great movie to like kind of put on. I never would have given it anything like I'm about to give it. So I think it was probably around 77, 78. I thought it was just good. I loved watching it last night. I loved watching with my kid. The only thing I would say is I think the second act is a little slow, and I do think that you do kind of lose focus a little bit. Not that much. First act so strong, third act so strong, character so strong. I'm going to give it a 91. I'm going to keep at a 91. It is not my favorite comedy of the year. It's not Office Space to me, but it's still it's a tremendous movie. 91's very good.
Yep.
I don't have
Felicia?
any context to rate anything, all right? But I will say that I think I watched this before I was involved in geeky productions and I had my career. I probably watched it when I was more into like dark or indie films.
Mhm.
I mean, like, Little Miss Sunshine. Like I was more of an indie film kind of girl.
Sure.
And so I think that I probably love this way more now than I would have when I first saw it in like 2002 or three on like DVD or VHS. Not VHS. Not all that. I'm not that old. I look very good for my age too. Yeah. Well,
You look great for an elf that's wearing
For
a
an
hat
elf.
and yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So anyway, I would give this is probably one of my top 10 comedies. For me, 1999 is okay. I'm a 1939 gal. So if
Sure.
you ever do another series, I think 1939
we're doing Patreons.
We're on
You
80.
do that.
We're doing 89 on Patreon right now, and in fact,
nice.
it's coming up very soon. But if we keep going back on the 9s, we'll get you back here from Wuthering Heights.
Oh, Wuthering Heights.
Wizard of Oz.
We'll get you back here for
Wizard of Oz. I mean, some of the best ever made.
Ninotchka, right?
Oh.
Garbo.
So many
Garbo
Gulliver's
laughs.
Travels. Now I'm going to look. Oh my God. Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Goodbye,
Yeah.
Mr. Chips.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Women of Mice and
39's a
Men.
hell of a
my
year.
God.
You do know the women didn't have a single male character. Every single character in the women was a woman.
That's great.
That's interesting.
Everyone.
Never really thought about that. Yeah, there's so many. Oh, Gugga Din. This is Dark
Oh,
Victory. Jeez, there's a lot of good movies.
Those are two problematic movies right there.
Babes and anyway, yep.
So next week we are covering The Iron Giant. We have Emily Vanderwerf and Libby Hill coming on.
That's one of my favorite movies ever.
What are your thoughts on The Iron Giant? That was a
I've
window
never
for you.
Never cried harder than in that movie.
Really?
No, that movie. But I cried in Babe Pig in the City. Like if that's my
I love
go-to.
Babe Pig in the City.
On if I'm on set and I need to cry, I will listen to Babe Pig in the City. That song, James Cromwell. I met James Cromwell once. I shook his hand and I started weeping openly. I am not exaggerating. And he looked at me like he did not think it was appropriate.
I don't believe you. I think he probably thought it was just fine.
He looked at me very strangely, you guys. It was not a comment, a reaction.
Did you give him context, or did he just think you were weeping?
I really love Babe, but I was like, he was like, I thought I was meeting a professional. Like,
oh, you're a professional. But The Iron Giant, Felicia, what is it that you love about The Iron Giant as we wrap this up?
I mean, it's the most heartfelt. I can't deal with anthropomorphic people, like creatures pass, like I don't want to spoil anything, but
just spoil
when they're in peril, that is the most heart-wrenching movie. I'm not kidding. That, and the only time I've ever cried more was, remember that, and this is a really terrible thing to admit, but I went with my mom to, remember that Michael Keaton movie Life?
Yes, sure, with Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
Just like a total manipulative piece of shit movie.
I cried the whole
so
movie,
hard.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He just dies of cancer and has a baby. Like, it's just like, why? And I've never cried harder than in those two movies. Iron Giant.
You know what a good anthropomorphic machine man thing in peril movie is?
Terminator 2?
No one really acknowledges it. But I love it. Have you guys seen Big Hero 6?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's good.
It is
I didn't cry,
so
but yeah, it's good.
Beautiful in its own way. And I think I see like a direct line from Iron Giant to Big Hero 6.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, Felicia, do you cry a lot at movies? No judgment. I'm just curious as to whether or not.
No, I don't like crying. I don't like crying on camera. I have to be paid a lot of money to cry on camera. And
you don't like showing emotion?
It's, I've been to a lot of therapy. It's a little bit better now.
Yeah.
No, I don't like crying, and I don't like watching tear jerky things. I want to watch either baking shows or comedies or genre shows that I can binge. You know what I'm saying? So
that's fair.
I don't have the highest class taste, but I'm excited. I will listen to your Iron Giant because that is a seminal
fantastic.
work.
Thank you.
I was a crying child. I was like one of those children who cried like as part of his personality until I was about 12 or 13. And I no longer can cry, and it's horrible. It's like
Was it something that people did to you because you were a crier? You labeled yourself? You were already labeling yourself.
I think that's what happened. I think at some point I resolved to never cry again. And it's like, or it's like Trump, where Trump says, you know, you only have a certain amount of energy in your life, so don't exercise. Maybe you only have a certain amount of tears in your
them all.
Maybe you only have a certain amount of tears in your life, and they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very. I love honest, crying, guys. And it's very hard for me to cry.
I cry fairly often. Certainly in a pandemic, I'm going to be honest. And a good cry, guys, it's a great release. I got to tell you.
No, it's true. Good. I can't cry right now. No, I can't. Yeah. I don't know if it's something about. I've been shut down.
I sneeze.
COVID. Yeah.
I get plenty of sneezes, so I'm
well,
good.
Felicia, thank you so much for coming on to talk about Galaxy Quest with us.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. You guys
podcast like it. You want a podcast like it? 1999.